Hello folks, Scott here with the brand new My Monthly Hero September 2022 kit. Of course, this comes in our big plastic zippered pouch. And this being September, we are going straight into autumn. Thankful autumn, Thanksgiving. So we have our 4x6-inch clear stamp set with this great big autumnal bouquet. There's like seed pods in there, a big vase, gigantic. This is like a hotel bouquet in the middle of the lobby there with a pear and a pomegranate flower, a couple of leaves sending gratitude. Hello, fall. So thankful. That's nice. Thank you and thinking of you. That's our stamp set. Of course, we get 6 coordinating frame cuts with that. That will cut out the large bouquet, of course. Also the pomegranate, the pear, the 2 leaves, and the flower as well. And this month, we get something kind of new and exciting. This Rub-On transfer sheet. Rub-Ons are kind of becoming hot and trendy these days as far as cards and crafting goes. Oh, there's your Rub-On stick. This is a sheet of Rub-Ons, which is that exact same vase with the flowers. And I'll bet you $1 to donuts that the die fits that as well. Of course it does. Put your Rub-On on paper and then die cut it out. There's the pear. Oh, that's got to be it. Yeah, so the pomegranate die fits too. There we go. It's those stray seeds on the bottom that throw me off. And then a bunch of other flowers and stuff. So you cut these out, peel off the backing, stick them on paper, rub them. They're Rub-Ons. You remember those from when we were kids? Rub it with your stick and peel off the liner. Those should be fun to play with. Very trendy these days. We also get a cling background stamp. This really nice filigree background stamp. Hero Art's background stamps are always high quality. And we also get 2 sheets each of cardstock, 2 in sand and 2 in antique ivory. Sand and antique ivory. Those, of course, are 8.5 by 5.5. And last but not least, we get some gold metallic floss. 5 yards of rose gold metallic floss. Yes, it does have a slightly pinky tint to that. And that's everything in the Thankful Bouquet September 2022 kit. Looks like we get to do some coloring, and I can't wait to play with the Rub-Ons. I am so thankful. And here we have my 10 cards for the month. We've got a black card that looks like a sand card. There's a antique ivory card, a couple of fun sizes here. Now, I have to admit that I was a little intimidated by this bouquet stamp. It's intricately detailed, which makes some of these flowers and foliage quite small. And of course, just to intimidate me more, the Rub-On bouquet, which is exactly the same as the stamp, even the die works for both of these. It's amazing and brilliantly colored. Usually, I think gold embossing on a white cardstock works really quite well for an elegant card, and it requires virtually no coloring, generally. So for my first card this month, we've got our gold one, Sending Gratitude. On a piece of watercolor paper from last month's kit, I stamped and embossed the bouquet, sentiment, and leaves using embossing and watermark ink and Hero Art's gold embossing powder. That's that good gold embossing powder. That worked okay, but there was so much detail in the center of that stamp. I mean, look at all of those little flowers and leaves. There's so much detail that I didn't think you could really tell what was going on with just the embossing. So ultimately, I thought the detail needed a little detailing. So I figured I'd stick with the gold theme. I reached for the Hero Arts Gold Glimmer Metallic Ink and painted all of the details on that with the glimmer metallic ink. There's lots of shine on this card that metallic ink almost takes over the embossing. And it mixes well with water, so I was actually able to get some subtle shading notes here and there. That worked quite nicely, and that actually gives us enough definition in the flower stems and leaves in the center of this bouquet that you can actually tell what's going on there. I die cut the panel with a Hero Arts rectangle infinity die next to the largest size, and glued that to a gold metallic mat cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I glued those both to a white card base. This would probably look really good on black cardstock as well, but I really like this gold card. Plenty of shine. Look at that. Plenty of shine on that whole card. Sending gratitude. I thought the little leaves on the side added a nice little autumnal falling leaf touch. So I figured I would try my hand at watercoloring one of these bouquets. So this is what we've got. Beautiful thank you card. This came out very nicely. I'm very pleased. I stamped this bouquet on more of that watercolor cardstock from last month's kit using Hero Arts Intense Black ink. I broke out my giant Daniel Smith dot card, thank you Pat, and painted our lovely autumn arrangement here. I did slightly use the Rub-On as a bit of a color reference for painting this bouquet, and I did try to keep an autumnal feeling, but I also tried to lighten everything up a little bit while still keeping some darkness and depth towards the center of the arrangement. Very pleased with this. I thought it came out nice. Once painted, I partially die cut the bouquet with the included die, leaving the base attached to the watercolor paper where I stamped the sentiment using Intense Black ink. For a little definition to our quote-unquote tabletop, I added a thin strip of bone cardstock and a line of the rose gold metallic floss to the edge of that watercolor base. It gives us nice definition there. I stamped the background cling stamp on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of the antique ivory cardstock using Hero Arts sand ink. I die cut 4 more bouquets from plain white cardstock and glued them all together behind the painted panel to add a little dimension without fussing with a million pieces of foam tape. And I glued all that to the stamped background. Okay, this did take me a couple hours to paint, but I really enjoyed the process and I am quite pleased with the final result. That background cling stamp is gorgeous and stamps like a dream. And while I doubt that I'll be painting a lot of these bouquets, it's satisfying to know that I can if I choose to. Take that, you Rub-Ons. Thank you. I literally, a little sidebar here, I had so much fun painting this with my little dot card that an email came across to me from my local Blick art store. They were having a sale on Daniel Smith watercolors. So I splurged and I bought my first Daniel Smith watercolor palette with 24 colors, 24 half pans of colors. I'm going to do a little swatch card with these. Maybe I'll put that up on YouTube, but I am so excited about this. There's lots of paint here. I'm dying to start playing with real Daniel Smith artist palette. While I was laboring over this watercolor bouquet, I was thinking there had to be an easier way to color this image when it occurred to me that we could color and stamp this bouquet using Tombow markers. Our next card is our Thinking of You card, all colored with Tombow markers. On a piece of Canson XL watercolor paper, I stamped the bouquet using my Tombow markers, coloring individual sections and lightly misting before stamping. It was a little challenging to differentiate all the plants on that clear stamp, but I used the cover sheet to help, and of course my Misty was indispensable. Once the whole stamp was complete, it was a breeze taking a damp brush to the foliage and spreading the Tombow colors around. It gives us a much softer, almost pastel bouquet while still keeping us in the realm of autumn. Once I was pleased with the Insta Tombow watercoloring, I did stamp the bouquet again using Hero Arts caramel ink to bring back some of the detail that you lose when you start coloring with the stamping. I die cut the floral display and trimmed off the left side so the sentiment would fit on the right. I die cut 2 more bouquets of white cardstock, glued those behind the original, and then glued those to the base of a 1/2-inch strip of sand cardstock with a touch of auburn pearl cardstock peeking out the top. I took a white card base and I spattered some watered down Tombow markers all over the background, same matching colors as a little bit of that red and that gold and that light tan. And then I glued my bouquet and my strip down to the card front and stamped the sentiment using Hero Art's sand ink. So here's another variation on coloring that bouquet stamp that's much quicker and almost as impressive as the watercolor version. I need to remember that Tombow markers can work as ink on a stamp. That was fun. I really thought that was fun. Okay, that's a pretty good run on that stamp from our stamp set. I thought I should give a little bit of love to our background stamp. Of course, I used it here. This is a great background stamp. I'm really, really impressed with it. So for our next card, we've got So Thankful, with just featuring that terrific cling background stamp. Look at that. Look at the shine on that. So I cut a piece of sand cardstock to 4 by 5 1/4 inches, and I embossed the background stamp using embossing and watermark ink and Hero Art's gold embossing powder. Again, absolutely, just look at that shine. Ooh, in both directions. It's beautiful. Now, we all know that Hero Art's cling stamps are exceptionally high quality, and this stamp lives up to all of the hype. I glued that background down to a white A2 card base, and I just admired it for a while. I stamped the sentiment on more of the sand cardstock using my Misty. Got a nice little shadowed sentiment here. I think you can see that. I stamped the intense black shadow first. I just scooted the cardstock a fraction to the right and a fraction up for the shadow. Then I put the cardstock back in the corner of the Misty and stamped and embossed the second layer in gold. Shadow stamping like this works really well with an embossed sentiment. I trimmed the sentiment down to 1 inch by 2 1/4 inches, added a thin white mat behind, and attached it to my card front at a slightly jaunty angle using foam tape. So Thankful. I think that's my favorite sentiment in our stamp set this month. I love the combination of the fonts on that. That cling stamp is so delightful. It can hold its own on a card. And to keep a little bit more love going for that cling stamp, I decided to do a little Joseph's coat technique using that cling stamp. And we have a thanks card in rainbow and shiny red. I think the autumnal palette was starting to get to me. I decided I needed something bright and colorful. So I ink blended Fruit Punch, Lemon Drop, and Blue Hawaii reactive inks on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white cardstock panel. I love how you get definite orange and a definite green just using those 3 inks. After that panel dried, I stamped the cling stamp with embossing and watermark ink and embossed it with some clear embossing powder. Then I ink blended intense black ink over the whole panel, wiping off the excess ink from the top of the embossing. I tell you, I tried 3 different black inks. I tried intense black ink from Hero Arts, VersaFine Onyx black ink, and Gina K Jet Black amalgam ink to try to get the background as black as possible. But something about the reactive inks underneath prevented me from getting a real black. It's still kind of a dark gray. Interesting. I'll have to experiment with that and see if I can get a blacker black on more of a regular dye ink instead of those reactive inks. Interesting. I die cut that panel with the Hero Arts Rectangle Infinity die. That's 3 1/2 by 4 3/4, and added a thin pitch black matte behind that. And since we have this nice rainbow background, I decided to echo that with the sentiment. This is the Lawn Fawn Scripty Thanks die, one of my favorite dies that I've had for a long time. Thanks fits on an A2 card so nicely. And I die cut 2 pieces of blue, green, yellow, orange, and red cardstock, glued those all together to make a nice chunky rainbow background for the back of my thanks. I waffled a little bit as to what to put on the top of that rainbow stack. I thought about black glitter. I cut one, didn't like it. I thought about red glitter. I cut one, I didn't like it. I finally came to this metallic red cardstock. This is a Tim Holtz, one of his metallic collections. I thought that worked really nicely. So then on a pitch black A2 card base, I added a 4 by 5¼ inch mat of that metallic red cardstock and mounted the matted rainbow panel straight on top of that. Now there's nothing particularly autumnal about this card, but you know, this rainbow makes me happy. And the thanks is perfectly on theme with this kit. Of course, I glued the thanks onto the cardstock. That's the only dimension on that card. Thanks, with a nice rainbow Joseph Coates stamp. I thought that technique worked great on this stamp. Very pleased. You might think I'm avoiding the rub-ons, but I was simply exploring the other stamping aspects of this kit to start with. So let's play with some of the rub-ons. And we have Thankful and Grateful for You with that bouquet rub-on. I have to admit, that large rub-on is pretty stunning. So I've gone ahead and cut out the large bouquet from one side of our rub-on sheet. That's the whole thing. I've got a piece of that antique ivory cardstock, 4¼ by 5½, and I have die cut a mask and put that on the front of my card where I believe I want my rub-on to go. And we're going to do some ink blending on this. I think of this as kind of a little bit of a grungy, maybe antique-y, definitely autumnal. We're going to stick with, I think we're going to go with that Sand Hero Hues core ink and a blending brush, and we're just going to go around the edges, see what it gives us. I think this works really well with the colors in this rub-on, and of course I probably have some green still on my brush. You know, you clean your brushes, and then before you start blending something, you check it on some paper or something, see if there's anything in there. Look, there's that green. And you don't get anything, but then you soon realize, as soon as you add some wetness to it, the color that was left behind comes right out. We're going to go with the flow here. I kind of like what that's doing. We're also going to use our background stamp on this. So I think this is all I really want here. I suppose I could go darker, just a little bit on the edges. Should I go darker? Let's go just a touch darker on the edges and see what happens. I think this is my brown brush. We're going to go with the caramel, give it a touch of caramel and see if that works. Just a light touch here. That brings it a little bit more into the realm of browns. I like that. That's nice. I think that'll go quite well. Yes, this doesn't have any stray green on it. I guess I really should be a little bit more proactive as far as washing my blending brushes go. You can wash them with simple soap and water. Wash all that old ink out of them. I only have a few. It's my Hero Arts blending brushes that I have specifically set aside for reds, yellows, and blues. I don't have so many blending brushes. There you go. Oh, that's nice. I'm going to touch on top of the rest of that, just very lightly. We're going to stamp our background stamp on this also. And because the mask is there, and there'll be a little bit of a gap there, it should keep it all a nice distance away from the rub-on. So, of course, my stamp is already set up in my MISTI. And I keep a Sizzix sticky grid mat in my big MISTI here. And I can just stick my cardstock down wherever I like. I think we're going to go back with that sand again and give that a try. I don't want a perfect stamp here. And of course it's in my MISTI, so we can always stamp it again if we must. Just do a light little press here. See what we got. That is plenty. Do we need a little more right there? You know, I think that's perfect because my sentiment will fit down there. Okay, we're gonna let that dry. And while that's drying, let's stamp our sentiment. This is a sentiment from the September of 2020 My Monthly Hero kit. This says, thankful and grateful for you. I like it because it's small and it fits most anywhere. I'll pull out my old ancient Misty. I'll stamp this on just a scrap of off-white, some bone, I think it is. Cheap cardstock. I'm using the reactive ink because it'll stay wet for a little bit of time. It would allow me to put some clear embossing powder on that. So let's not forget to prime our paper first. Then we'll stamp with root beer. See if I got that stamp clean. Let's give it another go round. One more stamp. Beautiful. Clear embossing powder. I'll have to just let that sit there for a minute while I warm up my heat gun. And then we'll go ahead and emboss this. Pardon all that noise. Let's see if an infinity die will work for this. I like that, and I can partially die cut that so it stops here at the G, then take that around to finish. Let's give that a try. That looks pretty straight. Of course, we want to only partially die cut that square. That looks pretty good. Let's pull it back a little bit. I can always hand cut it. The die cutter I go. That looks really nice. Never be afraid to sketch your fussy cutting line. You can always erase it. And so if this square would come straight down here, there you go, just a little sketch line to show me where to do my fussy cutting. And of course, I like to do my fussy cutting with my craft knife. I hope you don't hate me for that. Before I take it all apart, I'll take my eraser to that pencil line. That's gone. One last little cut, and there's our sentiment. That's nice, that came out good. Okay, this should be plenty dry now. Let's peel up our mask. And that's good, hardly any hard lines there at all. I am going to take that brush and without adding any ink to it whatsoever, just lightly go around those edges there. Let's give it the old college try. I peel off the backing, try not to get my fingers on the sticky part. Ooh, smell that plastic. And then let's, careful. Oh no! Oh, poor Scott. Oh, you are witnessing it here first. You have no second chance. I'm leaving it where it is. It's not perfect, but I hope I didn't get any big, huge, awful cracks. I totally missed my mark. Okay, we'll start from the bottom, making sure we're rubbed down, slowly peeling up. This may be tricky. Nope, those are not down yet. Goodness, I'm sure I let this dry long enough, didn't I? I know what I want. I'm going to use a ball stylus, the biggest ball stylus I own. See if that makes any difference in really pushing this stuff down. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. A little metal is what we wanted. Let me see if that'll work on these over here. Get those down, yes. Ah, yes. Ah, yes. I think we're coming up good here. There we go. Everything's down. Oh, whew. Not too bad. I can adjust the position on this piece with a die. And because this is plastic, the ink isn't really adhering itself on top of that. Let me give it a little wipe just to make sure. That's beautiful. That's really, really pretty. So let's grab a rectangular infinity die. We probably want, I'd love to a little frame around this. So let's see. I think that helps center everything back up pretty well. A little more ink right there. A little more ink on that one. I almost don't have any masking lines. I think we'll trim it right there. And there we go. I think we'll put this on this sand cardstock. Our nice little antique autumnal card. Do I need a darker border around that? So a little change of plan there. I decided I needed a dark frame around our main base before we get to the card base. So that looks really nice. I had to dig up some dark brown cardstock. I couldn't use black. There's no real black here. So we're going to glue this down to our card base. We open this way. I don't think I'll even bother putting a lighter writing surface on the inside. There you go. I don't want to bring any ink to this, but I will put that up on a piece of foam tape. I like this sentiment. It goes along with the whole theme of this kit. It's nice and small, and I think right there is just the perfect spot for it. I'll grab my T-square just so I make sure that I get this square to the card. Oh, that laid down pretty square right there. There you go. Now, isn't that a pretty card? Those rub-ons are something else. I want 2 or 3 sheets of those, please. Thank you. I think that is a really striking card. I like the antique distress feeling, and yes, that rub-on is in a class all by itself. Just gorgeous. There's hardly even any shine to it. Terrific. The rub-ons are so much fun. So that rub-on sheet has 2 bouquets, 2 pomegranates, a pear, and lots of assorted foliage, including a lot of leaves, a lot of autumn leaves. So I thought I'd use some of those rub-on leaves, and I couldn't resist trying the offset shadow stamping with that cling background stamp. That gives us our next card. Hello, fall. Hello. On a panel of the sand cardstock, I stamped the cling stamp in Hero Art's unicorn white ink, shifted that cardstock a little down and to the right, and then stamped again with the caramel ink. That gives us 3 colors of ink and a truly 3D look to this background. It almost looks like an embossing folder. I thought that came out really well. It worked great with that terrific cling stamp. I'm loving that cling stamp more and more every time I use it. I trimmed the background to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches and cut a diagonal across the middle. I added a mat behind the 2 pieces of auburn pearl cardstock, only showing the mat on the diagonal line. Then I glued both of those panels to an antique ivory card base. I cut out a bunch of the rub-on leaves and added them to the center opening, leaving some room for the sentiment. Now, I originally stamped this sentiment in the opening using caramel ink, but I didn't like how that looked, so I stamped the sentiment again on a scrap of bone cardstock with the root beer reactive ink. I clear embossed it, trimmed it down, and mounted it to the card front with foam tape. There's a few tiny little bronze gems scattered amongst the leaves there for a tiny touch of sparkle. This is not my favorite sentiment in the kit, hello fall, but I think it works well with this faux 3D background and a light tumble of autumn leaves. I'm certainly looking forward to fall this year. And then what to do with all those flowers and leaves and all those individual rub-ons. There's quite a batch of individual foliage rub-ons on that sheet. So we have another So Thankful card with a lovely autumnal wreath made with all of the little individual rub-on pieces. So I did cut out all the remaining individual rub-on pieces and I fiddled around with them for a pleasant arrangement. I rubbed them all into place on a piece of antique ivory cardstock to complete this wreath. Now, there are a few things I learned doing this. Number 1, the rub-ons are translucent, so you can see through them. Notice the poppy and that carnation over here. You can see the stem going through the center of that. Number 2, you can cut apart the individual rub-ons. This poppy seed head at the top here, the leaves on that are actually from way further down on the stem, and I just cut the leaves off of the lower part of the stem and added them closer to the pod at the top. Number 3, once applied, you can actually remove portions of the rub-ons with an eraser. Actually, a Xyron adhesive eraser works really good. You can shorten down all those stems. Whatever you want to take away, you can erase once it's on a card. You're not totally stuck with it. So I started on the bottom with these 2 flowers here and continued around the wreath in a clockwise motion. You can see some overlapping here, but as it goes around the card, I get better and better and better with my rub-on technique. I'm especially pleased with this dried lotus pod with the stem that looks like it goes behind the carnation and behind the poppy. That's just literally cutting that stem in different places and then rubbing it on where it belonged. The leaves at the base of the pomegranate here started out as a cluster of 3 leaves, and the 3rd leaf is over here. So remember, you can cut all of those pieces apart with your rub-ons. I'm so pleased with how this came out. This gave me a great deal of pleasure creating this. I stamped the sentiment below the wreath with intense black ink and embossed it with some clear embossing powder. I die cut that panel to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. I added a thin red mat and a thin mustard mat and glued those all down to an antique ivory card base. I love this card. It was massive fun using up almost all of those rub-ons. I'm so thankful. Okay, I've covered all of the sentiments in the stamp set. I still have more rub-ons to do. This is on like an A1 card, a little thank you card size. This is our next card, and we've got Eau de Pomme. There's a pun for you. Eau de Pomme. Eau de Pomme. I had fun with this one. This is 3.5 by 5 inches. I printed the sentiment using my Silhouette software and the Rostilla font on the front of that card. I rubbed the pomegranate onto a scrap of white cardstock and die cut it out with the included die. I used 2 Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle dies to make this dark red frame. This is 3 1/4 by 4 1/2. And since the Lawn Fawn dies are sized to A2 cards, I ultimately trimmed down my card base to 4 3/4 inches tall. I added the die cut pomegranate with foam tape, and we have a juicy congratulations card for any pomegranate lover. That takes care of that second pomegranate rub-on. I couldn't resist this last card. Heaven knows I know a lot of people who I'd love to send this card to. Card number 10, and we have Grow a Pear. I suppose this could go to your favorite horticulturalist, but I think the pun's much more fun. Grow a pear already. I hope I don't offend anyone, but this tickles me to no end. Again, we are on a 3.5 by 5 inch plain white card base. I printed the sentiment on a scrap of white cardstock using the Rockwell font. I ink blended a little sand ink under where I thought the pear rub-on would go. I added the pear along with a cute little leaf and then die cut the image with a Hero Arts square infinity die that's 1 3/4 inch. I added a dark brown mat and mounted both to the card front with foam tape. This might seem a little brash, but it really is an encouragement card. Strongly encouraging. Grow a pear. Appropriate for any sex. And before you know it, that's my 10 cards created with the My Monthly Hero September 2022 kit. I truly enjoyed myself with this kit, much more than I thought I would. The wide variety of contents kept just feeding my imagination. However, I didn't actually use all the stamps this month. I missed the pomegranate and the pear and the little flower. Oops, but I was like, why bother stamping and coloring those when we had such terrific rub-ons to use? I did use all of the sentiment stamps, most of the cardstock, and I even used a little piece of that rose gold metallic floss. Kept that. I'm also pleased to say that I only have 1 bouquet and that pampas grass rub-on left. That's it. That was my big accomplishment this month, was using up almost that entire sheet of Rub-Ons. This is really a nice varied set of cards. Most do have a bountiful autumn feel to them, and a couple of puns never hurt. I absolutely adore this background cling stamp. The Rub-Ons were fun to play with, and even that detailed bouquet stamp provided me with a few hours of pleasure. Let me know which card or cards are your favorite. Now, this kit is still available at Hero Arts. I guess I wasn't the only one intimidated by that stamp. So if I've managed to capture your imagination, or maybe sparked an idea or two of your own, or even if you just want to play with some of the new Rub-Ons, I suggest grabbing a kit for yourself before they're all gone. When you do go shopping at Hero Arts, please use my links in the description down below. It's always supremely appreciated, and it truly helps support this page. Thank you so very much for sharing some time with me today. I'm always encouraged and humbled and thankful for your attention. I had fun this month. I hope you did too. Remember to like me, list me, pin me, post me, friend me, follow me, share me with all of your crafting friends and enemies. Remember, don't run with scissors. I wish you all a beautiful and bounteous autumn, and I'm sending you and yours love and light and happy crafting. For more detailed information, better pictures, and product links, please visit my website at cardcutups.com.